Hi there, how's it going? Bonnie Violet here, a queer chaplain. And in case you don't know where you are at Trans Spirit as part of Glide's Pride season of, I guess, programming. This is the first of 6 episodes just of us taking some time to talk about the intersections of spirituality and drag and transness and gayness and all that sort of fun stuff. And tonight we're going to be focusing on the conversation around being trans and spirituality. And we'll get to that in a second. But I do want to thank Glide. Glide Memorial Church is our sponsor for this evening, as well as the Glide Pride team. Without their help and support, this wouldn't be happening. And so this is part of their Pride programming. If you don't know who I am a transgender queer spiritual drag artist and digital chaplain named Bonnie Violet. I love doing this stuff. So as a digital chaplain, I feel called to being with people around death and dying, to self in the form of identities, and in the form of identities that I've experienced myself, that I've had to kind of go through a crushing and a death and a coming to understand myself in new ways, and dealing with my transness and my HIV status and so many things in my life as an addict and alcoholic. And a lot of those times I went through believing and thinking that I couldn't have God, or I couldn't bring my spirit into that part of my life, that they had to be these separate things. And I've come to be in a space in which I can exist with everything all at once. I just want to help people know that it's possible, because I know a big part of me is I just didn't know I could. It was like I was waiting for somebody to give me permission, or it was like one of those times when you don't know what it is maybe that you're looking for, or you don't know the questions to ask until you come to know something. And for me, once I started hearing other people share their experiences, I was like, oh, wow, that's me, or that's not quite me, but I can find myself in there. So, and we all have different experiences. And so that's why I love that I'm getting to have these conversations with a diverse group of people. I have more experience talking with drag queens and drag kings and non-binary drag artists. I have done 25 interviews with drag artists, but this is my first kind of focus on just talking about transness and spirituality. I think I wanted to, please take a moment and share, share this with your friends so they can join us. Hi, sis. Great. Glad you could join us, Stacy. Stacy is super big lead in making sure that this event is happening. So thank you so much, sis. I'm glad that you could be here. So without further ado, let me just check my notes. Okay, I think we're all good. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the conversation. My guest this evening is Reverend Kai Daniel Moore. So here we go. Hi, Kai.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Hey, how's it going?
Not bad, thanks. Thanks for having me with you.
For sure. Fancy seeing you here. This random just chance that we happen to be in the same space, huh? Yeah. Glad you could join me tonight as well. So let's start with, how do you identify? Kind of introduce the group. Introduce yourself a little bit.
Hey, yeah. Well, I am currently a PhD student in theology at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. I hail from the East Coast originally, and I'm also a pastor in the Presbyterian Church USA. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So a lot of the times I like to start a little bit kind of where it began. I know that we all have different experiences around spirituality. I feel like sometimes it can change over time. I don't think we grow up knowing exactly who we are and got it all figured out. Maybe you did. Not so much. Yeah. So do you mind telling me a little bit about your childhood, about growing up, whatever it feels like you want to share?
Yeah. I feel like I've always been in the church in some way or another. And that's really, it's grown and evolved and changed over the years. But I was born, raised at a Presbyterian church on the East Coast, and also went to a Quaker school So I had, church on Sundays and meeting for worship on Wednesdays, which was lovely. And so church was always a really good place. I had friends there, and I was a weird queer kid growing up, even if I didn't use those words then. But church was a place where I had friends and could do things. And when the community like supported me and liked that I was there, when I was in high school, and most of the other high schoolers are off being, doing cool high school things, and I'm there, and they appreciated that. So then, yeah, church has always been a good place for me growing up, and then I started to discern a call to ministry to lead church in some sort of way, and then that's where things started to get a little crunchy for me in terms of queerness.
How old were you when you first started feeling that or thinking that?
Really, maybe once I graduated college. I had a great time in undergrad, was an American Studies major, did a bunch of activism around homelessness issues in Providence, where I was in school. And one of the people I was organizing with had grown up Catholic and was intending to go off to seminary and be a priest. And I was like, I have never thought about that. And I respected them so much in the organizing that we were doing together. And then and it became a really sort of, it wasn't meant to be a faith-based group that we had, but it turned out that we were all there motivated by our faiths in different kinds of ways. And so we ended up talking about that a lot, about the sort of the drive to do this activist work because of these different commitments from our faith traditions. And that became a thing that really supported that work. So then
go ahead.
So then I graduated and was like, what do I do with my life? And was thinking about maybe seminary is a place that I can sort of put this activism and faith thing together in a particular kind of way. And applied to seminary sort of without necessarily intending to go off and be a pastor, but was like, this is the thing that makes sense. And I wound up at Union Seminary in New York, which has this real tradition of socially engaged, politically engaged faith work, which was great. It was a great place for me to be. And then I started thinking about like, okay, well, do I want to actually be a pastor and be in a congregation, and how does that work? And at that point, this was, I guess, 2006 when I started seminary, and the Presbyterian Church very loudly did not ordain queer and trans people at that point.
And were you identifying as queer or trans at that time?
Oh, yeah. Definitely queer. I knew that I was queer. I've always known that I was non-binary, but didn't really have words for it. It just sort of was a thing, like, growing up, it was like, I don't know. It was just this thing in the back of my mind that I didn't really work through very much until pretty recently. But it was, I definitely knew that I was queer, even if I didn't quite know the shades of what I meant by that.
And so it was a natural integration of all those things. Did you ever have any hesitation of, I guess, being queer, going to seminary, being an activist? Did it always feel like those things fit, or?
The seminary part fit. The queer and the activist and the seminary part was a pretty easy fit of the, like, because especially in my Quaker school growing up, that I had a class, required class in 10th grade called Peace, Justice, and Social Change. And so we talked about all of these people who, like, this is what faith meant to me growing up, was like, you have these convictions and they lead you to do things in the world. And that's part of what really clicked for me doing this activist work in Providence was like, oh, this is not just something that people tell me in Sunday school. This is something like our beliefs can actually like mean something about the way that we live in the world and the way that we interact with one another. Yeah.
Right.
So that really clicked for me.
More than just kind of going to church every Sunday and like saying the stuff, but actually kind of putting it into action by doing the work.
Yeah.
You said your activism was around homelessness in the beginning?
Yeah. When I was in Providence, it was a group of students from my school, and we paired up with a group of homeless and formerly homeless activists organizing around, there were some city ordinances about like failure to move and loitering and that kind of thing that were really being used to criminalize homelessness. And so we were organizing specifically around getting those ordinances, whatever you do to laws to get them taken away or whatever.
Yeah. Getting rid of them. Yes.
Yeah.
And so when did you get out what brought you to California, or when did you land here?
California was, I've been here since 2015. I came out here for my PhD work. There's a whole chunk of East Coast things. I was ended up serving at church in Delaware immediately before I came out here, which was really amazing. I was also in campus ministry at that point too. So, and I really enjoyed that work. I was out as bisexual there and not as genderqueer in any way. I was sort of consciously like, not that I was closeted about that consciously, but like, oh, I have some stuff I need to work through about that, and I am not in a space where I can work through that right now.
Right. And what position did you have there? Were you what role did you have in Delaware?
I was an associate pastor at a church, and one of the campus pastors at University of Delaware as well.
Awesome.
Yeah. So it was a lot of fun and very, very public, as you know, the sort of church leader, which I love. That I've always been like these kind of here's what I'm doing. Here's how I'm vulnerable and what's going on for me right now, and let's do that together. But that's not necessarily a place that I could be for very long, and certainly not while transitioning.
Right. And so you're Presbyterian, is that correct? And
Yeah.
You've always been kind of in that, I want to say like elk or realm, if you will, denomination.
Yeah. Actually, yeah. Born and raised Presbyterian, and now I'm ordained there, which feels like a strange thing for a queer and trans person, but it makes total sense for me. Of just like, yeah, this is the tradition where I feel at home, even as my I really have interacted with a lot of different traditions, and have really been served by that. And so my spirituality is much, I think, broader than most people think of like this very narrow, like Protestant thing.
Right.
Even that's sort of where I'm grounded.
Right. And the Presbyterians is like a part of Christianity, like it's Christianity in one form or another. Could you, like, for folks who maybe don't know the difference or know what makes a Presbyterian a Presbyterian?
Yeah, it's a Protestant denomination, and it's sort of the quote unquote main line, which is like mostly white, pretty traditional kind of thing. And in some ways, the distinctions are becoming more about the form of government, like the way that we organize the church, rather than theological differences. But there are some theological differences too. That it tends to be, it's under the umbrella of sort of progressive-ish Protestant denominations, especially over the last few years, since in 2011, we changed the rule prohibiting queer and trans people from being ordained. And so the official stance of the church has shifted a little bit to the left, but also there's been a lot of churches who have left the denomination because of that. They started their own new Presbyterian denomination because that's what we keep doing.
Yeah.
And so it's become a much more liberal denomination over the last few years.
Yeah. Seems like a lot of like communities of faith have kind of they've just been split, and it's always us queers that are like dividing it up.
Yeah. It's a huge issue these days for a lot of traditions.
Yeah, it's great. I think a lot of folks, or I don't want to say a lot of folks, but I think there's this perception that transness can't really exist, maybe even in particular, like with the Christian belief or understanding. Can you kind of share with that how, like, I know it wasn't necessarily something you've like fought with or was like, I don't know if this fits, but can you explain how you understood it to fit, I guess, if that makes sense?
Yeah, like how my transness fits with my Christianness.
There we go.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's never really been a question. Like, obviously it fits because I am both of these things. And so,
right.
But I think it's been really interesting over the last few years. I think I started more explicitly socially transitioning in like 2015, 16 or so, like not long after I moved to California, and was like, oh, hey, I'm not in this really public facing role anymore. I can do a little bit of this work. Right. But I've also been really working in that time on like finding a spiritual practice that works for me, finding a like way of praying particularly that works for me, because church has been always a thing for me, but like never I've tried out and struggled a little bit to find a like specific spiritual practice that works for me. And over about the same time that I've been transitioning, actually, I've really kind of sunk into a kind of prayer meditation thing that has been really fitting for me. I think I kind of, what changed is I maybe started letting it be a physical practice too. Like, I would, my church wasn't ever like a kneeling or you have to fold your hands and bow your head kind of tradition, but letting myself like, what does it feel like for me to kneel and pray and like to actually and to try out like child's pose or like laying down face up or face down, or like getting these sort of physical postures that help me sort of sink into a prayerful kind of space. And one of the things that I think I've really started to feel or learn from that is really a sense of God's presence, like with me in this very sort of physical, intimate kind of way. That this language about it, or imagery around creation and God as creator, like choosing to sustain my life every day, and that my prayer is like my choosing to be in relationship with that. That like energy, spirit, as I sense it. And so it's this sort of like really evolving kind of feeling really sustained in the things that are going on with my body, the sort of evolution transition of it, and feeling like leaning into God as creator, like holding me in that.
Right. And would you say that's kind of like, for me, the understanding of that is that's kind of where spirituality lands. I know like a lot of the times when, I don't know, people hear spirituality and they think like it's this woo woo kind of like crystals, new age, like, which it could be. And that's great. Right. That's great. But like, to me, my understanding of spirituality is like religion is going to church, doing the things. To me, I felt like it was something I did when I was young, I guess, in my understanding. And like spirituality to me is like what the adults do, I guess. I don't know, that's like a horrible way to say it, but it just feels like a graduated version. It's a way that I can go directly to the divine without having to, like, I don't know, go through somebody else, or I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear that. And I definitely, I don't want to separate them too much because I really love church too. And it is a place that I like, that feeds my spirituality too.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, I'm a singer. I grew up singing in church like all the time. And so hearing people sing, hearing the old hymns, like really hit something for
Mm-hmm.
me. That like spiritual, I guess, and that is really sort of connecting. And so I think it's useful to, like, rhetorically to distinguish between religion and spirituality in that way. But I, especially as a pastor, I really don't want them to be separate. Want to have the religious spaces be shaped in such a way that people can have spiritual experiences in them.
Do you see your transness impacting the way that you pastor, or how you pastor?
Yes, sort of to be determined, a little bit, because I've been in grad school for most of my transition, and so I kind of needed that to, like, step out of such a public role in order to, like, do this work on myself. And I'm now kind of feeling like it's not done, but it's like it's solid enough that I can come back out a little bit in public. And I'm hopefully graduating in September. I just scheduled my dissertation defense for September. So I'm applying for jobs and as, like, in ministry and that kind of thing. So it will, but I haven't quite figured out how yet.
Right. So if folks are hiring, there's a link in the description.
Right.
Reach out to Kai. What is it that drew you to being a pastor?
People, really working with people. Like, I think the thing that I really always say is just how much I love people and love being with people. And the experience of, like, really connecting deeply with people on the stuff that matters to them, and being able to use my own experience of, like, all of the internal wrestling that I've done and the stuff that I've been through, to be able to use that to, like, open up what the world means, how we can understand the world in a way that can help other people.
Mm-hmm.
And there is other, like, I love all the different parts of it. Like, I love leading worship and I love preaching, and but also I love the theology of it. Like, the work I'm doing now in grad school is really kind of a deep dive into how I can articulate the Christian tradition in a way that that feels liberative for queer and trans people, especially, and other people who've been alienated from the church. It's really, like, wanting to get down to the nitty gritty of, like, how we articulate what it means to be Christian.
Right. Do you want to talk more about that? Like, what you're working on right now?
I can stop me when this goes super long, because I can talk about this forever. But okay, so I'm in the theology area, and I also work with queer theory and philosophy. So I'm doing a lot of Foucault and bodies and power and that kind of thing. So, but my dissertation work is specifically looking at the crucifixion of Jesus, and seeing some kind of, like, okay, queer theory, queer theology has something that we can say about this particular very bodily experience. And it's about looking at the cross and thinking through power and imagining the cross in a way, or the death of Jesus more broadly, in a way that is not totally disempowered, is not just a sacrifice, is not just this like very empty submission kind of thing, but to be able to say, like, okay, how can we see like personhood in this broken body that is really marginalized, and how can we see power there? Yeah, it's really fun. So I'm using Foucault and kind of doing a Foucauldian analysis of the crucifixion in a way to.
I feel like, what's Foucault?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Michel Foucault, French philosopher who died of AIDS and is a favorite of queer theorists.
Gotcha.
He was amazing. Is a lot of theories of how power works, looking at specific institutions like prisons and mental institutions and hospitals, that kind of thing, to really analyze how power works. It's very kinky. That didn't quite make it into his work because French and the mid 20th century, but yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So so I guess the thing that I want to say about my dissertation is reading this death as through the lens of looking at particularly the image that I was using before George Floyd's death was this photo from a Black Lives Matter protest in, I think, Baton Rouge in 2016, I want to say, a woman in a spaghetti strap dress being arrested by a couple riot cops. That Aisha Evans was her name. And it was this really striking image that went pretty viral. And the thing that strikes me about it is the two different, very, very different kinds of power that they have there. She's got, it looks like she has nothing. She's just, bare shoulders fluttering in the breeze. And, but she said in interviews later, in statements later, she's thinking about her son. She's thinking about her training in the history of Black resistance movements and about her community and her family and all of this sort of web of support. And so she's got this kind of internal strength. And faced with these, like, the institutions of the state, they've got all of this sort of like armor and, and they're white and they've got this whole line of riot cops behind them. And it's all of this sort of external signifiers of power, of like, power as aggression and dominance. And she's there just like exuding this confidence. And she said in a statement too, that she wanted to see the eyes of the cops' eyes, have them acknowledge her personhood.
Powerful.
Right? And it's sort of this really embodied kind of power that, is willing to accept this kind of bodily vulnerability for this bigger message with this, broader community support, that vulnerability doesn't quite have the same meaning, that she's got a different kind of power than this sort of state power. Especially as we're looking at like all of these activists like going out into the streets in the middle of a pandemic and risking all this like tear gas and police violence for the sake of this much bigger message of like Black Lives Matter. And so using this image to read the crucifixion, to see Jesus in that same kind of way of, accepting this bodily risk for the sake of getting out there and delivering this message about who God is and about judgment of sin of, well, to use very Christian language,
right.
but judgment against, like, you are crucifying my people, like this has to stop, and really putting himself on the line in order to deliver that message.
Yeah, stop killing us. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's so powerful. I personally, like, I don't know what to do with Jesus. Like, I don't know what to do with her in the Bible and stuff, but I've come to hear the Bible so differently. And like, it's almost kind of embarrassing, but I'd never heard, like, I guess I don't know. I just hadn't been exposed a lot, but hearing like the story of the eunuch, the Ethiopian eunuch, which in some ways is a Black trans woman, right? Like, loosely, right? Like in nowadays, I think it's been really helpful for me to begin to see how that relates to what's going on in the world right now. And also like how to, like my place in the world. Like, I think my spirituality has really helped me know how to respond to all of this stuff that's happening that can be it can be hard to know how to react and what to do. And it feels like when I go connect with my spirituality, that's like, here's your answer. Like, duh, stupid. Like, this is what you do. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to take like a quick second for folks. Please do, like, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments wherever you're watching. Folks are watching us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. So please do leave us questions or comments. We're just going to take take a little break so people can catch their breath, like literally probably like 30 seconds or so, and we'll be right back. Bloop, we're back. Just a little pause, I guess. Folks didn't have any questions yet, but feel free if you have any questions at any point in time, please do ask them. If we don't want to answer them, we won't, but feel free to ask. And I don't say that to be mean, but some questions just don't need to be answered, I guess, in this particular forum or whatever. So don't let that keep you from asking the question. Just know that if we don't, it just might not be, we all have our comfort levels, I guess. So that felt a little weird, a weird statement, but I'm just putting it out there. I think when we're up in the public, there's so many, there's just so much that can come at us. I know I've been, and I don't know if you've experienced this, kind of being a now queer trans person in ministry. There are a lot of Christians who believe we're doing it all wrong, and they like to tell us that we're not. Have you dealt, I'm not going to assume, have you dealt with that? And how do you respond or react to those sorts of situations?
Yeah, I've definitely dealt with that, especially around the issue of being ordained. That was, it was still very much a contested issue in the Presbyterian Church when I was ordained in 2013, and they changed the rules in 2011. So I was one of the first handful of out queer folks who was ordained, and I when I was examined by my presbytery, which is what they like interrogate you about your theology or whatever before you're ordained, and that was a little bit of a sort of hostile, like I was getting up and literally there's a couple hundred people who are allowed to ask me whatever they want about whatever they want in terms of my faith or life or anything. And so I got a lot of that kind of aggression thrown at me there. And particularly there, but my strategy in general is to be better at it to like that. That's a funny way to say it. Just that to really dig into my love of the Christian tradition in a way, and my belief that it can be better. I think that's what I was really thinking about what you said before the break, of all of the ways that the Christian tradition has been really harmful in people's lives, that we've caused so much harm in the world and to specific people's lives, and like we can't get away from that. But also that doesn't have to be the only thing it is. That I believe it can be more than that. And my experience in the church has been really positive for the most part, and I want to make that possible for other people. And my theological work is about wanting to articulate a real faithful version of the Christian story that is absolutely built in and around queer and trans lives and bodies, and motivated by the and integration of science and contemporary theories in order to sorry, I'm trying to read this comment.
Yeah, I'll read it out loud. So Stacy says, Kai, I'm so proud of all the things that you are doing in the community. I'm from Chicago. Churches I'm glad be a little different there. Sorry. And the story you just said really touched me. This is so powerful. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I apologized if I butchered that, but it's up on the screen for those who are watching.
Thank you, Stacy, and thank you and I'm sorry to get interrupted there, but I really believe it can be better. We can do it better. So that's the thing that has really helped to react to the haters and to survive, really. Yeah,
I've been like, where do I want to go with that? There's so much there's so much for me personally. Like I've just been I grew up Christian. I've struggled. I haven't been somebody who's felt like I could exist in my fullness within my Christian understanding. And I've become more open about it. And I feel like the more that I've connected to my spiritual, to me, I feel like I have a spiritual experience. I've had a spiritual experience. I'm continuing to be created by my creator. So it's like still happening, but everything that I learn or I fall short. Like the Bible to me, it's like, I want to try to twist it and turn it and make it work for me. And then sometimes it feels like too much work. You know what I mean? Like to have to do the mental gymnastics of all that.
Yeah, it's a lot. But this language about createdness really, I think there's really something generative to do with it in terms of being able to think of ourselves and our transness as ongoing creations of God, and to recognize the way that bodies are changing all of the time, and that we are created to grow up, and there is no body that doesn't change, and it's part of this sort of evolution. Is really part of, for me, it's really, really integrated with my own spirituality and being conscious of where I'm being led in my own life. That, I feel like my transition has been kind of an exploration the whole time. I've never really known where I'm going. What's your goal? What am I'm not doing things in order to get to a goal. I'm sort of maybe I think hormones feel good right now. It feels like maybe a thing I want to try. And then okay, yeah, this is feeling good. I want to go into this a little bit, lean into this. And it's a process of sort of evolution and discovery, in not in the way of this sort of introspective, I am pulling away the layers to find some internal truth, of myself, but it's this kind of forward directed like exploration journey of evolution of like, what does God want for me now?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially with me, like I'm disabled as well. I was in a car accident as a teenager, and so like it's that was my first transition, and it's this sort of leaning into my body as evolving, and it's been trying to not fight my body in that way, and just to figure out what feels good, and that's the sort of really countercultural thing. The paying attention to feeling, like we're not supposed to do that.
Yeah, we're not supposed to like feed into our desires, or we're somehow supposed to like sacrifice ourselves or deny ourselves, even like in the name of God, which I just don't believe that that's even what God wants for us. Like God didn't give us all this beautiful life for us to just like be miserable.
No.
I mean, I think we have to watch our desires because they can get a little wonky. They can go a little too far, but you know, desires are a gift from God, I think.
Yeah. No, I think it's a thing to explore and to balance and to value, along with, you know, how do you want to be in the world and relate to people? What are the sort of ethical values? But also like what paying attention to my own desires and needs is a value of mine too. And so to kind of balance all those things, like, and I've found like they tend to be more in alignment than you might expect. That's not like, oh, I want things that are hurtful to other people. Like, if I'm really being honest, of like the things that are generative for me are also generative for the people that I'm in relationship with, because those relationships are so life-giving for me.
Right. Becky does have a question. She says, what is your religious perspective on sexual relationships? Do you pastor to LGBTQ issues of promiscuity, the same as hetero promiscuity?
Yeah, I think the question of sexual ethics like is always a big one. And the thing that is really important for me to that I always want to emphasize is that, you know, we have these rules about like, if you're in a straight monogamous relationship, like that's okay. And it's all the other kinds of relationships that we have to then ask, like, well, are you being ethical about this? And what are you doing? How can you justify this? When there are lots of, you know, unethical behaviors that happen in straight monogamous relationships too. And so I think it's really important that we start to broaden this conversation, and we talk about all kinds of relationships in terms of like, how are you relating to one another? How is this life-giving for one another? What are the ways that you treat each other responsibly and act on your desires in ways that serve the relationship and don't break it down. Those are the kinds of questions we need to be asking, rather than like about the specific form of, you know, like what are the genders and numbers of the people that you're in relationships with.
Right.
I think it's possible for faithful, life-giving relationships to come in pretty much any configuration.
Agreed.
But that there are these deeper kinds of introspective questions that we need to be asking about, like, you know, does these things that you're doing actually serve you and to serve the relationship?
Right. Well, and I think as like a pastor, as a spiritual person, like, is God in that relationship? If God can't be in that relationship from your experience, then that's where something is wrong. Like that might be where something is wrong. And that's something that only like you can know personally. Like you have to get honest with yourself about what's correct and what's not correct for you. But I know that I know a lot of people feel weird to invite God into your sexuality, but I think that it's been really huge for me to be able to do that, and not in a sense of like having a lot of partners or doing all these sorts of things in and of itself is not sinful and is not bad. It's what those things how those things impact my life and impact the lives of the people that I'm doing that with, that matters. The actual thing itself really doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think your comment about inviting God into your relationships, I think it feels a little bit like, I feel like I'm going to offend both my Christian community and my queer community by saying that, of like, praying before you go on a date, like that. Those are things that I do, of like really actually being attentive to like to what God wants, how, or that's maybe not what I mean, but like where God is for you, and how those relationships are fitting into your life in a spiritual way.
Yeah, I think that's something that can be really challenging. I was talking with some other Christian faith leaders and that are queer folks, and we were putting together like this coalition of talking about what is a queer sexual ethic, like a Christian sexual ethic, even like how do you talk about reproduction with queer folks, and STDs, or even like polyamorous relationships, or even marriage, or like what is. And again, I think that all really just comes down to like you being able to like really land in yourself and like really just kind of like, I don't know, be able to take an assessment of what's around you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I think people have, well, and maybe this is my Quaker background popping up, of the being able to access, being able to hear God directly, like being open, listening for like, what is God saying to me? What is the divine saying to me, or whatever, whatever language like feels good, to really be open to like, how am I being led here? What is the thing that feels life-giving for me and for these people that I'm in relationship with, or trying to be in relationship with? What are the formations, and what are the agreements, what are the actions that are going to actually like serve to build us up, and to build up this relationship? Because I believe like the act of being in relation is one of the like most holy things. Like we see God in each other, and we build up God, or we help to make God's presence visible and felt when we relate to one another in positive ways. And there are ways that our choices and our actions can build that up, and there are other choices we can make that really that break that down. And so it's a paying attention to like, what are the actions, what are the choices that are going to actually make this relationship more holy and more whole.
And I mean, I think in my experience, I know it was like really difficult for me to integrate the two, my sexuality and my spirituality. But like, as soon as I did, it made my sexuality actually easier to be with. You know what I mean? Like, and honestly, like, I started my spiritual journey after getting sober and stuff. Like, I've had more personally, like, I'm not necessarily talking about, but I've had more sex and types of sexual relationships since I've leaned into a spiritual way of living than I ever had before that, because I was full of shame. I was full of like, everything had to be done in the dark, or, like it couldn't be talked about. And so like, to me, it's just like inviting your spirit into that is just like shedding a little light in those areas. It's just made it easier, really.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes so much sense to me. I really feel that. Yeah, like when you are yourself and when you're present to yourself, it's so much easier to be in relationship with other people, and those relationships end up being better, and you can treat those other people better when you're able to treat yourself better.
Right, and that's the thing that's so like frustrating to me, because I would not have had that shame and that crap if I didn't learn it in church. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if I wasn't told, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, I go back and forth with that, because God never told me that. Like, God never told me like, you can't be who you are. It was like everyone else told me I couldn't.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Ugh, yeah, we get so many of those messages from everywhere, and the church is one of the worst on that too. And
yes. So the big question is, I'm not sure how you integrate all of this, but how do you be trans and queer and spiritual and a pastor and do roller derby?
oh, everyone asks that question, and I'm like, I don't. It always just like fits for me. I don't know. I wouldn't know how to separate them. And I miss roller derby. We haven't been able to do it since before the pandemic, though. So love to my derby friends. I'll see you eventually. But for me, it's like it's just a part of what we were talking about it being authentic, like showing up, like bringing all of yourself. Like I tried to compartmentalize myself a little bit, and it just doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me to like be the, you know, super pious, holy person who doesn't curse and doesn't talk about sex over here, and to then like, you know, go to punk shows and roller derby and whatever on the other hand. That and I think it's a counterintuitive thing, or it's a countercultural thing in a lot of those different spaces. I often feel like you know, in the roller derby world, people look at me a little weird from the pastor thing sometimes. And definitely my churches haven't quite known what to do with me most of the time. But I feel like one of the beautiful things that queerness has to offer the world and transness has to offer the world is remaking the world into spaces where we can bring these things together. That there's no reason those things have to be separate, and that it's part of this sort of artificial kind of categorizing that we've done of like, oh, the holy stuff belongs over here and the profane stuff belongs over here. And like, that's so arbitrary. And I'm not sure whoever like made those decisions about what falls into what category, but
like the binary of it and the light and the like the black and whiteness of it all. I heard somebody say recently the shades of light, that there are the shades of light, which I really loved that, rather than shades of gray, like shades of light. Like that's kind of badass.
Yeah, I like
about it. But there is a lot more between, you know, and to me that's where God is. God lies in the tween of things, and I want to be closer to that. So like I often find myself like in that tween. Like I love being in that tween because it feels, I think I feel closest to the divine.
Amen to that.
Yeah. Stacy says, Stacy says, I'm messing up. I'm so used to using the controls, and somebody else is doing that tonight, so I should let her do that. I'm really sorry, Perry. So Stacy says, we must understand that God loves us all, and we too support each other to make this world better. And having these conversations really do help, and they are needed. And then just for a change of voice, do you want to read Nora's? Oh yeah, Stacy also says, Kai, may God continue to bless you in all you do. Amen. And then if you want to read Nora's comment.
Yeah. And to you as well, Stacy, may God bless you.
Yes.
Nora says, being spiritual led me be what God intended for me to be, which I came full circle at Glide, gave me that space, and be present and dance, which I am one with God. Oh, that's beautiful, Nora. Thank you.
So good. So good. So we have hit that like 50, we're 55 minutes in. So I don't usually like to go over an hour because then I have to edit, and she didn't really got that skill yet. So is there anything you'd like to say before we go?
Mostly just thank you for making this space. I love the opportunity to talk about transness and queerness, or transness and spirituality. Like, and especially for me, like I've talked before about queerness and my faith, but the talking explicitly about the trans stuff is still new for me too. So thanks for inviting me to be here and to help sort of start to articulate some of this stuff.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye to you real quick, and then it'll just be me on the screen to say goodbye to everyone else. But thank you so much, Kai.
Thank you.
Good night. I wanted to take a moment and thank everyone. Oh, that was such a good conversation. I can't wait to have more. Like, I was sharing with Kai about this before, like these conversations, like I have such a desire and I need them just as much as I hope you all do. And I hope that it's helpful for you. So I just feel really fed and really just lifted, you know? So thank you so much, Kai, for helping me with that this evening. We're going to continue to do these conversations. The interesting thing is that most of my drag artists are actually trans as well. So we'll be having a lot of talks around the intersections of trans and drag and all of that fun stuff. So at the end of this segment, I'm going to play a little clip so you can see all of the future events. But the next event we have on Monday, pretty much every Monday and Friday for the next 3 weeks at 7 o'clock, we will be having one of these conversations. So on Monday, we'll be meeting with Polly Amber Ross, who is also Peter pansexual. So they are a drag king and a drag queen, and they are also non-binary. So I'm really excited about being able to have that conversation with you all as well. Please, if you would like to continue to see programming like this happen, go to my Patreon. You can support that way financially, or if you want to collaborate in some way, have me come do something. Yeah, like I'm up for traveling. I'll travel if you host, or even just whatever. I'm really excited and want to continue to kind of keep working with folks. So if you can help encourage me and support me in some way, that's greatly appreciated. And check out also Kai's website. There's some writings and there's like blog, and there's just a lot of information on there about Kai and Kai's history. So if you want to connect with him, that's a great place to go. And I'm keeping an eye out for that book that you're working on. I think that was all I needed to say, but I cannot say thank you enough to Glide and the Glide Pride team for hosting this event and allowing me to be in the space of hosting this event. So check out the links in the description if you need to learn more about anything, and we'll see you next week. Take care. I love you, and ta-ta for now.
Oh, you turned up some